Just so I don't forget. Okay, I show it's 11:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us. I am Suzanne Jones. I'm the Safe Schools Coordinator with the Division of Elementary and Secondary Education. And today we're very proud to have with us Jimmy Mcgill, who is with the Arkansas Office of the State Drug Director. And I think there's a better title, but that's the one I'm used to. And he's going to be talking with us about the peer recovery support specialists. Before we get started, before I turn it over to him, I just want to give a couple housekeeping things. We are recording this session, and anyone who is registered will get the link to know when it's up. Please feel free and share it with anyone who might be interested. Along the bottom of your screen, you should see kind of a menu bar, and one of the options should say live transcript or closed captioning. If you want to turn that on, you've got some options about being able to see the transcript across the screen. If you've got internet and your if you want to follow that along, sometimes if your internet is lagging or if it's kind of glitchy, then sometimes the transcript will kind of keep up with it. Let me. For some reason, it's only turning on for certain people, I think. So maybe that's got it. There we go. Does everyone kind of see it across the screen if you're looking for it? Okay, good. So that should be able to help you as well. If you have any questions as we're going through, feel free to pop those into the chat, and we'll Jimmy can see those. We'll probably answer questions at the end. And we are recording this session. I did mention that. You'll be able to share that with your colleagues if you're interested. I'm going to put a few links into the chat. One of them is for an evaluation. We'd appreciate that if you'd fill it out so we can have some feedback on this session. Another is for the mailing list. If you're not on my mailing list and you'd like to be for more information on school safety trainings and resources, you can sign up for that. Everyone who's joining us today will get a certificate. If you got the link from someone other than me, directly from me, that's perfectly fine. Just send me an email or put your email in the chat to me so that I can make sure I can get your certificate to you. And I'll also put in my email address in case you need that as well. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jimmy. And thank you all for being here. And if you need me, I'll be in the background monitoring the chat.
Thank you. I hope everybody can hear me okay. My name is Jimmy Mcgill, and I'm super excited to be here. Thank you so much, Suzanne, for the invitation to come share my experience, strength, and hope, and my knowledge on peer support and what we do in Arkansas. And so I am a person in long-term recovery from the disease of addiction, and I have got an amazing life today. Now that is, hang on one second, I'm trying to get this stuff situated over here, you guys. It wasn't always like that, though. I'm also a certified peer recovery peer supervisor for the state of Arkansas, and my official title is Director of Recovery Support Services for DHS, the Arkansas Department of Human Services. And so what we're going to dive into today, I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, here we go. And so, like I said, this is a quick presentation for the Arkansas Department of Education. My name's Jimmy Mcgill. I'm a peer recovery peer supervisor. What I do in my day-to-day job is I develop, evaluate, and implement peer recovery services. I find challenges, I work through those, and I advocate for people in long-term recovery to have a seat at the table when talking about policies, procedures, and the Arkansas model. And so what we're going to talk about today is what does peer recovery support services look like in the state of Arkansas? And so Arkansas is kind of the national leader for peer support services, what that looks like. We have been able to accomplish some things in Arkansas that other states have not, primarily because we have a governor and a state drug director who understand addiction and alcoholism better than most. And so it has been a primary focal point. And so with this, what we're going to discuss is the innovative practices used in Arkansas that put us into that leadership. What's so special about Arkansas that we were able to develop, grow, and sustain the peer recovery workforce when other states around the nation struggle in this? And so our learning objectives today will be that everybody here will be able to understand the history of the Arkansas peer recovery model. You'll be able to describe that model, and you'll be able to describe and be informed about Arkansas's innovative initiatives. And so the first thing we're going to do is we are going to dive in to what is a peer recovery specialist? What is a peer support specialist? What is a peer recovery coach? What is a recovery coach? And so all these names and terminology you may hear in your field, you may hear them thrown around, but the actual answer for what is the difference is nothing. There's nothing different about a peer support specialist, a peer recovery specialist, a recovery coach, a peer mentor, a peer navigator. These are all things referring to a person with lived experience who has received training Was that on my end? Did I go out, Suzanne?
I'm not sure. I got kicked out myself, so not sure
Yeah,
what happened.
I got a text saying that I went out, so I'm not sure how far back I went. Let's the whole thing froze. Okay.
Okay.
All right, let's get back to it. So I'll run through some of that again because I don't know how much you guys missed. So basically, a peer support specialist is a person with lived experience who has been trained and who has an ethic, obligation, and responsibility. There are supervision, certification, standards of practice, scope of work. But in this presentation, when you hear recovery coach, peer specialist, peer services, they are all referring to somebody with lived experience in both addiction, mental health, and recovery. It's got to be both sides, right? And that lived experience qualifies them to have an expertise that professional training can't replicate. Peer support workers come with a passion that really can't be bought, taught, or replicated. And because of that passion, we are willing to go back into the same fires that once consumed us, that were meant to destroy us, but ended up refining us. And we carry buckets of water for those still burning, right? And so we bring this lived experience with a desire to help that you just don't see in a lot of people. Most of us have a history with violence and gang activities, substance use, alcoholism, and the lifestyle that accompanies these things. Some of the services that we do And what that looks like is we believe in empowering people. We believe in the power of choice, self-determination, right? You hear recovery is for people who want it, not people who need it. And that's true, right? Like that's the principle of self-determination is I have to be able to make that choice for myself. But it's also about they may not know they want recovery until they hear it or see it, right? We use easy to understand language, and that's really important probably from an educator standpoint, because if a person doesn't identify with the person carrying that message, they won't listen to them, right? And so we speak a language that they tend to be able to identify with. The message didn't change, but the messenger did. We believe in mentoring through motivation. We help transport, like we can go to court with them. We can go to 12-step meetings, self-help groups. We do specialized community trainings, advocacy, support groups, one-on-one, things of that nature. And so also, the Arkansas model has 4 steps. Now it looks like 3, but there's actually 4. Once you apply to become a peer in training, you have to meet these qualifications, and then you can go to the training. Now, this is what's unique because no other state does this. You can become a peer in training, and during that time, you have 500 hours that you have to get in order to take your state exam, right? Those 500 hours of work experience, and 46 of those are education-based class time hours. Now, once you finish your 5-day training to become a peer, you'll then get a letter from our certification manager saying you are a peer in training, a PIT. After that, you will have the opportunity to meet all those qualifications, go take your state exam, and you'll become a basic level peer recovery specialist. But then the career ladder comes in. So Arkansas is the only state in the nation to develop an advanced track and a supervisory track, ensuring that peers only receive supervision from seasoned peer workers. And that's important for the professional development because what we do is the only job scope in the history of the nation that's built off of lived experience and not learned experience, right? And so it's really important. Like doctors learn from doctors, teachers learn from other teachers, police learn from police officers, peers learn from peers, right? Like a mechanic doesn't go learn how to turn a wrench from a doctor because a doctor uses a scaffold. I mean, can you imagine if a doctor tried to learn how to provide medical procedures from a mechanic? I mean, we would really be in trouble. And so that's the importance of the seasoned piece of supervision. And Arkansas was the first state to implement that, and that's in statute. And so what it takes to qualify to become a peer in training, which is the first step, you have to have a minimum of 2 years of personal recovery. You have to have a high school diploma or a GED. That's important because, we send emails, you basic read and write skills, and you can't have committed a sexual offense or a murder charge, attempted murder, kidnapping, extreme violence, things like that. Now the core level peer, and this is the same for every level, right? Like you have to complete a training, you have to have 46 hours of education. 16 of those hours are needed outside of the training. And then you've got the 500 hours, and 100 of those 500 work experience hours are very domain specific, right? Like I need 25 hours specifically in the domain of advocacy, 25 hours in ethical responsibility, right? Like how do I set these boundaries? How do I behave in a proper setting? 25 hours or education and mentoring, and then recovery and wellness. And then 25 hours of my supervision have to be direct supervision, hands-on by a certified peer supervisor. So that is the Arkansas model, right? You got the peer in training, the core level, the advanced, and then the supervisor. And there's a pay change at each level. So every peer wants to reach that supervision level. It's workforce development. It's a safeguard to ensure that people in recovery always have a seat at that table. Then now that we develop that model, how do we credential it? How do we ensure that it becomes that quality assurance, that everything about it, right, is I'm sorry, my phone's going off over here. So we contracted with NADAC, the National Association for Addiction Professionals. And so NADAC would come in, certify all 3 levels of the exam of our model. They would hire an Arkansas native who has went through all 3 levels, who's familiar with our model, who knows our culture in Arkansas, to oversee that. And so they did. They hired Kyle Brewer. I often joke with him and call him the boy next door. Kyle is very professional, and he is very passionate about peer support. And he would assist DHS in our application process, because now we've trained over almost 500 people in peer support, right? And so his job is to make sure that that training and that supervision is met, and that they have everything they need to take the state exam. He would credential all 3 levels of the test for DHS. He would also oversee the ethics committee, the Arkansas Peer Ethics Review Committee, called APERC. So when an ethics complaint comes in, it goes to Kyle. Kyle forwards it to the ethics committee, and then the procedures begin, right? Like the investigation, if it's found with merit, without merit, what needs to happen, all the things that go along with ethics review committees, which nobody wants to be a part of that, by the way. And then he would also oversee the supervision process, right? Because that 500 hours of informative education and quality assurance that you're learning what we do as peers, what we don't do. And so one of the things about peer support that is really unique is we never put ourselves in a position of authority, right? We never give advice. We don't tell you what to do if you're the person receiving services, because if we give you that advice and it doesn't pan out, guess who they blame? They blame us, and you no longer trust me now. And so if you don't trust me, then you won't be honest with me, and we won't have that rapport. And so one of Kyle's key jobs is to make sure that the peers know what they do the right way by receiving proper supervision. And I often joke with him and call him the peer police. He does a really good job of monitoring that. And so the DHS peer unit, what we do, where do we work, how could it benefit the Department of Education, right? And so from an agency standpoint, people in recovery are important, right? Like DHS has really grabbed that bull by the horns and showed Arkansas that they support people in recovery. And so what you see here is you see the DHS recovery unit. And ironically, our recovery time is in numeratical order, right? Like Michaela's got 4 years. Misty, who is our peer recovery supervisor, has 5. Russell, who is overseeing our prison program, has 6. I have 7, and I'm the director of services. And then Michael, who is really an amazing asset to our team, has recovery services. And what he typically does is a lot of site visits, a lot of documentation, and he's got an uncanny gift as a wordsmith, right? So we try to make sure that all reports get funneled through Michael, so that we look good when we send information out, right? Like he's really good at grammar policing stuff and making sure everything's written the way it should be, and that's a quality we really value over here. And so next, what is that? Let's see. Program development. Lonoke County Jail was where the first program started. We had 12 men who were released out of that program that had 16 people in it. 60% of those men had never been offered drug treatment. They were not aware that substance use is a disease or that recovery was even an option. 40% of them had been to treatment before. And 60% of those men chose to go to a recovery house, a sober living facility, after their release. And 85% of those guys had been incarcerated at the same jail for more than 3 times up to after 30 days after their release, right? And for more than 30 days at a time. That program at the end of a year, year and a half, was at a 74% success rate. And so that opened all the other programs that we're fixing to take a look at. That program drove the data that fueled the funding for these new peer programs. And so now those metrics that we looked at for that sustained recovery was drug urinalysis, employment, housing, family engagement, community engagement, and how many of those men reoffended or were rearrested. And so that created the birth of the multiple PACT projects. You've got Lonoke County, Lawrence County, Garland County, Sebastian County, the Division of Youth, Saline County. These are all criminal justice settings that have a peer. And in most cases, those peers have a criminal history, right? Like the people who are overseeing these aren't just in recovery, they have felony convictions. A lot of them did time in the very jails that they work in. And that's what brings the authenticity of peer-to-peer recovery support services to the table, right? When they receive services from one of their own, it's a different, it hits different, right? Like they're open to it. We also have 5 faith-based initiatives that will be providing peer support services. We have Daughters of the Other Side. We have Sozo, which is in Hot Springs, Safe Haven Women in Clarksville, ARM 180 in DeWitt, and Hoover Treatment Center here in Little Rock. And so these are all faith-based places that will provide free services to men and women, and they have peer support, Narcan, all that good stuff. We also have 3 recovery community organizations. Now, if you're an educator and this is a valuable resource to you, if you're in the Bentonville area, it's Pearl. If you're in Jefferson County, surrounding counties of Pine Bluff, it's Exodus.life. And if you are in Central Arkansas, it's the Wolf Street Foundation. These places are fully staffed with peer recovery workers who advocate for recovery. They orchestrate events, marches, rallies. They have all kinds of fun stuff at these places. And anybody, regardless of their financial stability, you don't have to have any money. You don't need an ID, a birth certificate. If you walk in one of those 3 places and say, I need help, you're going to get that help immediately and free. It is same day services. They have peers just running up and down those hallways and they're chomping at the bit to help someone. And so really important information. If you're an educator, you may know someone who needs help and you can just simply refer them to call one of those 3 places and they'll get that help immediately. One of the cool things that we're getting to do starting next Monday, we launch a peer training academy inside the prison systems. And this is going to be to help combat recidivism. I myself came out of prison and 2 years later had a state career. And so other people on my staff inside DHS also have been to prison and came out of prison. And so we built this concept based on us that we can't be the only 2 people that came out of prison and got our life straight. So there are a lot of men who, once they realize that they can turn their past into a financial pathway for a secure future, they won't come home and recidivate. They won't come home and do the same stuff. They may come home and find recovery and immediately they're employable, right? And so this is a training academy that will help us certify 80 new men each year as returning citizens. They can immediately go home and work in the criminal justice system. And who knows that system better than men and women who have been in that system? And so far, we've seen, really good strides in this area. Another thing we have is the peer and police partnerships. This program was actually built off of my relationship with our drug director, Kirk Lane, who was once my arresting officer, held me accountable for my actions. I went to prison, and today he mentors me and helped shape my future, and I work directly under him. And so when we sat down and we had this extra funding, we were like, how do we replicate this? Because we've done really good at smashing stigma when we pair up as a team. It's almost like Cops and Robbers with a happy ending. And so we wanted to replicate that. And so we chose 6 different police forces that would hire a person in recovery, and we would pair them with that law enforcement, and they would go out and work overdoses. They would do trainings together. They would educate the communities. They would go to the schools. They would do everything they could from 2 opposite ends of the spectrum to bring 2 communities together to make the communities better. And so we got Lonoke County, Hot Springs PD, Johnson County, Izard County Drug Task Force, 6 Central DTF, and Jefferson County. We have peers in the hospital rooms because when a person wakes up from an overdose, it is extremely powerful when somebody is in that room that is dressed like they dress, talks like they talk, and says, hey, CJ, I understand what it feels like to wake up in this room. Let me tell you about the last 6 times I woke up from an overdose. The conversation just starts different, right? And so within seconds, this instant rapport is developed that most clinical people haven't been able to develop with these people, no matter how many times they tried. And I say that from lived experience, right? Like along my journey with multiple trips of incarceration and 23 years of an IV drug habit, like there were tons and tons of people, doctors, lawyers, nurses, preachers, teachers, psychiatrists, therapists, LCSWs, all these people tried to reach me. It wasn't that they weren't qualified. It wasn't that they weren't good at their jobs. The truth of it is, I wouldn't give them a chance. I wouldn't listen to them. I was afraid they would be condescending to me. I was afraid if I was honest and said, hey, I stole all my mom's jewelry to go get high, that they would be judgmental to me. But with a peer, someone who shared their recovery and said, hey, Jimmy, I've been where you've been. Nothing you've done, I ain't done. I've probably done worse, to be honest with you. Within seconds, we were in an honest conversation, and he had accomplished something that people had been trying decades to do and had failed. And so that is the magic of being a peer. And so we have Saline County Emergency Room, River Valley Primary Care. That peer oversees 11 different clinics. We're in Unity Health in Newport, Jefferson County, and Bradley County Medical Center in Warren, Arkansas. And so we've seen great success too. We've seen less readmissions in the hospital. We've seen less overdoses in the hospitals that have peers. And so that's really cool data. And so some of the other places we have peer support in Arkansas is the Department of Health, recovery housing, sober living, mobile crisis units, treatment centers, RCOs, and reentry centers. And anywhere that you really see addiction, anywhere you see mental health, you should also see recovery services. And one place I would really like to see that is in the Department of Education. Honestly, if the high school kids have some, because in Arkansas, we're seeing an influx on fake pills, uh, fentanyl being pressed into Xanax, Roxy 30s, Adderall that's not really Adderall, but it's methamphetamine pressed. And the problem that you have there is all the methamphetamine has fentanyl in it. So the overdoses are happening. And if that recovery component is introduced into the school, because I started using when I was in the 7th grade. All of my team started using when we were in junior high school. And so if we have recovery services there, someone who they're not afraid to talk to, and the peer is a complementary service to the guidance counselor, right? Like the counselor may not be able to say, hey, dude, pull your head out of your butt, bro. That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard you say, man. I would never do that. Why don't we go catch a meeting? And they can literally go to the recovery group together. They can facilitate groups in the school. And it's a different type of service. It's non-clinical. So you've got your clinical services and your non-clinical services. And when it's done right, they work beautifully together. And so that is it for that presentation. And so I am open to any kind of questions that you guys may have. I'm going to stop this screen share and bring everybody back in together. And so I told Suzanne I would have time to do that. I did it in 30 minutes. Go, Jimmy. So, yay, I can't hear you. You're muted.
That's a good job.
Thank you.
So I have a question. It kind of stems from the conversation. Every time I hear you speak, I learn more and more and more. So did I understand you to say there's 500 people trained around the state of Arkansas in one of those roles as a peer support?
Yeah. So we're working on about I can tell you the exact number. I have to pull it up real quick. But yes, it is close to 500. You can also go to the Arkansas Drug Take Back, AR Take Back. .org, and there's something called the Arkansas Opioid Response Dashboard, and you'll see all these tabs that give you beautiful information on peer support, on fatal overdoses, national deaths. We have trained 468 people.
Wow. And they are all over the state. You mentioned all the different places. So they're attached to one of those places somehow.
Yeah, so all those different programs have certified peers. All those peers that have been trained are not certified. Some of them may not even be working in that role. But yes.
So if any of y'all have questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. You can turn on your video or kind of raise your hand if you'd like, if you'd rather just kind of ask or talk with Jimmy. Another piece I want to bring out. So like we've got a couple teachers in the schools here with us. If they wanted one of these peer recovery specialists just to come to their classroom and talk, maybe during Red Ribbon Week, or if they're talking about drug addiction, is that a possibility?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to type in my name and email in the chat, and if you email or call, I will get you a peer any time of the year. It doesn't have to be Red Ribbon Week, but we do a lot of presentations during Red Ribbon Week. Most of us come with a gang, especially if they're out of Little Rock, right? There is this, clear correlation of gang activity in our past, myself included. And so there's my email address and my phone number. You can call or text me, and I will, I'll line them up.
Okay.
And I've got them. I've got peers all the way down to 21 years old with tattoos all over, like literally just graduated. So yeah, it's a great thing. And it's fun, Suzanne. That's what we like to do. We want to go back into the schools. We want to go talk.
Jimmy.
Hey.
Hey, yes. I serve as a pastor outside of Benton, and just curious how the peer recovery specialist could be beneficial for me as I encounter and deal with those struggling with addiction. Maybe they're currently in rehab, just graduating rehab, or need to go to rehab.
No, yeah, absolutely. So I was on a campaign, Dylan, for a long time that every church should have a peer support specialist on staff. My church does, for sure. And so you've got your lay counselors, your biblical counselors, and then you've got your recovery pastor who happens to be a certified peer supervisor. And so, it's that resource brokering, right? And so you takes that load off of your back as pastor as well, because you've got that subject matter expert at the church who you love and trust, that you can, send the members of your flock to him, right? Or her. But
Thank you so much.
if you don't have one, you can always, call those RCOs that I mentioned, Wolf Street, and you're in Benton, so you could use Jefferson County or Wolf Street.
And Jefferson's the Exodus.life. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yeah. Sure is.
Underneath your information in the chat, I popped in the artakeback.org website. It's got a lot of great information about this program and all the efforts of the Office of the Drug Director. So coming back to the school, because I know we've got other people besides school staff in here, but you mentioned so if someone, if let's say a student, and I think we talked about this before, if a student's interested in getting help for themselves, they could reach out to the support specialist. They could get help themselves. They may have to have parental involvement to make it okay, but really if the student or if the kid is asking for help, there's a way to get them help.
Yes. Yeah. Um, so you're saying run it one more time, Suzanne. I want to make sure that.
I just know sometimes the kids, we do have teachers in the schools that have a good rapport with students, and sometimes
Mhm.
kids may be using and their parents don't know, or
Yeah.
they have a trusted adult or teacher that they will say, I really need to talk to someone. I think I need help, but I
Mhm.
don't want to tell mom and dad because they're just going to blow their lid. Can that youth, and I'm usually talking about someone under the age of 18, can they be referred to the peer specialist just for that conversation, or do we have to say, no, you need to go back through your parents and then go this route?
No, I think I don't, there's nothing on our end that requires us to not provide services to someone under 18. You know what I mean? Um, and yeah, so obviously, as long as the service is voluntary, right? Like that's the thing about us, you can't coerce or force, you can't barter. Well, you're in trouble, so you have to see this peer 5 times. That's not how it works. You have to want the service, you have to request it, you have to volunteer for it. That's that self-determination and power of choice that we stand on. And so, and we're mandated reporters, and you know, we're bound by HIPAA. We're also bound by CFR 42 Part 2, which is actually more strict than HIPAA. So it's like, those are privileged conversations between the peer and the person receiving service. And so it's like, eh, you know, they're that it's there too, just like a teacher. And so, and that sucks because of COVID, right? Like the you see this addiction affects not just the people who use, but if you have a parent who's using, then there's obviously going to be some environmental impact, and there's going to be some emotional abuse and environmental abuse that takes place. And COVID stopped a lot of school, and so the people that these children, our youth, obviously teacher, the most valuable mandated reporters we have, that rapport, the persons they see more than any. COVID decreased that. And so now they're stuck at home where the drug use is amplifying because of COVID without that support. And so, that's the thing that we were able to do. The recovery community was able to mobilize virtually overnight. And so, the relationship between the peers and the teachers needs to be in existence for sure. It needs to be there.
I think that's so important. And I think I keep coming back to it because, so like if a student discloses to a teacher that they're using drugs, that the student themselves is using drugs, that's not a hotline call. That's not a mandated reporter. That's not neglect or
Right.
abuse or treatment. That is just a student using drugs. Now, if
Yeah.
they're overdosing, that's a different situation. But just a student saying, I've messed around with something, or I'm hooked on something, I want help, is not a hotline call.
No.
So there's not much that a teacher can do except encourage them to get treatment or start working towards that. So that's why I think peer recovery is such an amazing piece, because it's something that a teacher can hand to a student.
Yeah.
Here,
Yeah,
here's who you need to talk to.
absolutely. In a perfect world where it would work perfectly in a Walgreens scenario, right? Like the school should have a peer support specialist at the school. You know what I mean? Somebody that they could say, hey, why don't you go talk to Mr. Jimmy? Like he's former gang member. He used drugs for 23 years. He went to prison. And they're like, what? And they're like, okay. And and so then it does become voluntary because they're interested in talking to him because, hey, he's been exactly where you're at and he won't tell anybody. He's trustworthy.
Absolutely. Well, and what you mentioned about the different drugs that are showing up in the schools, and everything's laced and everything's fake anymore. And sometimes I've heard stories through like our human trafficking training and things where students think they're just using marijuana and it's laced with something and they just
Yeah.
get hooked and hooked and hooked. So, just like with the Adderall, the example you gave, there are students who wind up hooked on a substance that they didn't even know they were taking. And so that's a situation that they wind up in, and they're just not out kind of on left field. They don't know they were using fentanyl or that they had something else in there, and it just turns the world upside down. They don't have anyone to talk to about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Does anyone else have a question? Do you want to open up your cameras or your mic and ask Jimmy a question? Everyone's shy today.
Yay! We fixed it.
Yeah, they know everything they need to know.
Yes, they're peer champions now. They can go forth and make peers.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna ask you another question. Would you Amanda, did you have, yeah, go ahead.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm extremely interested in this because I am in a little bitty community, really far away from a larger city. We've got a lot of drug use around here, and I see it with the kiddos and I see it with the parents, and I, on a daily basis, work with DHS, and I'm in the school setting. And any extra information you can give on how we can jumpstart this or what we need to do, I would be very, very interested in that.
Yeah. Okay. So, I don't know how to answer that. So say it one more time, Amanda. What are you asking for now?
So I am a nurse in the school district, and how do we get a peer inside our school district?
Yeah. So that's a Department of Education question, not a Jimmy question.
Okay.
But if they want one, I can make that happen, right? Like I can find you somebody of good quality service for sure.
Is there an age limit? I mean, can they talk to pre-K all the way up to?
I mean, there's not a limit on our end. We talk where we're requested to talk at.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
Amanda, my suggestion would be to have a conversation with your superintendent, your principal, whoever your first chain of command is. You might even have them watch this recording so that they can kind of get a better idea if they're not familiar with the program, and then start talking to them about how could something like that be folded into the school district. Or, and Jimmy and I were talking about this, there are laws and requirements of people who are put on a high school campus or a school campus, period. And so making sure that the right peer is paired up and is kosher with everybody. I think that's important too. But speaking, like you said, as a small community, there might be a community partner there that you might want to partner with, a church or something, so that that person might really be a part of that community organization, but they service the school as well. Does that make sense? I think there's a lot of options, and Jimmy outlined several different models, whether it's the community model. I don't know if you have a detention center there, if you've got any kind of youth facilities that might be able to partner with the school. That would be my first start with your administration and start a conversation.
Absolutely. When I saw this yesterday, I was extremely interested and I reached out. But absolutely. And Jimmy, thank you for being so honest and upfront.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think Jimmy would probably be open to coming and speak. Like after you talk with your administration, if they want to have questions, I think Jimmy would probably come and visit with you.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, would love to.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jimmy, I was gonna give you a second to talk about your book.
Oh.
I love your book, and I want you to kind of share that resource because I think it just puts everything in perspective when you hear your own words. So
Yeah, absolutely. Let me pull it up real quick.
okay.
I will post that link in there for you. So yeah, I actually wrote a book during COVID called Prison to Purpose, because I am and I just typed it in the chat if you guys want to go check it out. By no means feel obligated though. Yeah, it's just basically my detailed journey, how I went from a multiple offender in and out of the Arkansas Department of Corrections to becoming a successful returning citizen who re-entered society and had new resources open, and how I became, a 19-time convicted felon to a ordained pastor to a government employee to it's all God for sure. It's amazing. It's a really cool journey when you look back on it. And it was a really fun book to write. It was really easy to write. My favorite chapter is Prison and Chelsea, right? Like my wife in prison. Those were the two I had because I was reliving all these stories. And there's this misconception that a lot of times it's going to sound really insane, Suzanne, when I say this, but I was sober in prison. So I saw things from a different perspective, and I laughed harder in prison than I ever laughed in the street, right? Until I found recovery, because nothing out here was funny. It was miserable, right? Like I was using to survive. And so, yeah, it was a really fun book. If you want to go check it out, go check it out. All right.
I
So-
think adding that personal level to, hearing you say you're a recovering addict, hearing you say that you're a felon, hearing you say that you've been through all of this is
Yeah,
one
for
thing.
sure.
So you're so honest and open in the book and several other things that where you tell your story that it just adds to the relevancy,
Yeah.
reality of it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Well,
Anyone else? If y'all don't have any questions, I'll let you out early, but I sure want you to make use of this time with Jimmy while we've got him. Again, this session is being recorded, so you can go back and refer to it. Everyone who's registered will get a link to where it's going to be posted. Please share it with other people because this is an awesome program. And we do have so much substance abuse issues in our state, whether it's youth in schools, whether it's adults, parents of children, or even our colleagues, our coworkers. COVID did a number on everyone, and we've got people who through COVID had an opposite experience, and they came out with substance use issues. And so this is a program that can really help anyone that's struggling with those issues. So if there's no other questions, I will let me see. Let me pop back in the link in case y'all need it. Please fill out the evaluation. That always helps me plan our next sessions, helps me understand what you're looking for and the resources that I can provide from the Safe Schools office. And I will cut us off and say thank you, Jimmy, and everyone have a great week.
thank you. Bye, yeah.
Bye.